Dozens of countries around the world are now subject to U.S. President Donald Trump's latest round of tariffs. While countries like Canada say they're working to negotiate better trade deals with the U.S. president, Trump is doubling down on the use of tariffs as a way to boost the U.S. economy.
1 year ago, they said your country was dead, and now you have the hottest country anywhere in the world. We do. We have the hottest country in the world right now. The tariffs have helped. It's given us not only the money, it's billions, trillions of dollars of money, but it gives us great power over enemies.
But not all Republicans agree, including Representative Don Bacon, who represents a district in Nebraska. He joins us now. You in the past have spoken out against tariffs targeting Canada. You've watched this trade war unfold. From your perspective, how would you describe the Canada-U.S. relationship in this moment?
Unfortunately, it's in a rocky spot, but it shouldn't be. The United States and Canada have been friends for, a century plus. We've had a great undefended border, and we've had a great relationship together. We've had a great trade relationship. And by the way, our trade relationship is quite equitable. Canada may have a little advantage on exports. We have an advantage in services. We also have a great tourism industry. So it's been a win-win relationship between us. And I hate to see this trade, the tariffs that the president's put on Canada poison the water, and it has. I've also all the talk about Canada's being a 51st state, and the governor, Governor Trudeau, and all those kinds of conversations that's come out of the White House has hurt her standing in Canada, and that's a shame. And for what purpose? I don't see where it's an advantage to America or Canada. We build on a tight relationship, and it's a win-win relationship. And when we hurt each other, nobody comes out ahead on this. So I have not supported the president when it comes to tariffs on Canada, or just the tone that he's had towards our northern neighbor. And we have a chance to build on USMCA. Both sides have lived up to the agreement, and we should build on it. Where there's been seams, we can fix that and improve the trade relationship even further.
How are the tariffs on Canada, how are they affecting people who live in your state of Nebraska?
Well, it's a mix between the tariffs, but also just some anger that we've seen towards from Canadians towards America on the 51st state types of talk. I've seen some of our companies in Omaha state that they've lost some customers from Canada, and we understand that, but it's not the company's fault doing this. But we understand that there's some anger right now. We're seeing it. So there's been lost contracts. We've seen some loss in trade. We've seen some loss in tourism. And again, for what reason? I don't see where it has benefited America at all. And we've had a great trade relationship. We should build on it.
So I've asked about this. So I'm normally a reporter who's based in Washington, and we try to speak with American lawmakers on a regular basis. You're one of the first I've spoken to who seems to understand the anger that is sort of radiating out of Canada. I'm curious as to what you've noticed and how you sort of have seen that sort of play out in your state.
Well, our companies give me this feedback from Omaha. We have a lot of Fortune 500 companies. And, Canada and America has a very integrated manufacturing, and we have a very integrated economy. So when one side is angry at the other and they're stopping contracts or not renewing contracts, loss of tourism, we feel it on our side. And again, I would just say to the White House, for what purpose? I believe in free trade. Free trade provides the best merchandise, the best product at the best price in the most efficient manner possible. And when we do a free trade that's fair, both sides benefit. And that's what Canada and the United States has had over the many decades. And I, for the life of me, don't know what the president or the White House sees in benefit in, degrading or insulting our neighbor. It doesn't gain us anything. It surely doesn't gain Canada anything. It hurts our economic relationship. And I don't see a single purpose being filled here.
As someone who watches this very closely, is there anything, if you were to give the Canadian government advice on how to be dealing with Donald Trump and trying to navigate this tariff war, what advice would you give to the Canadian side in this moment?
Well, far be it for me to advise our Canadian friends on this. I feel better advising my own side. I think we should try to renew USMCA and make it even better. There's a few seams in there that we could fill in, and that would be where my focus area would be at. I think it should be a win-win relationship. It should be a fair relationship. It has been. And I think it would be fair to point out to our side that there's been a slight advantage, yes, in exports for Canada, but America has had an advantage in services, and in tourism it's about the same. So this has been a equitable, fair relationship. I do think the one area that our White House brings up that would be something worth to consider on the Canadian side is defense spending. America spends 2.9% of our GDP on defense now. It's going to go up to 4% this year. We got to sustain that. And that is the area that we know that America can't shoulder that alone. Russia is clearly a threat, the way they're treating Ukraine. China is becoming equal to ours in the economy and in defense spending, a threat to Taiwan. We have other threats like Iran and terrorism still. So this is going to have to be the free world working together there. So if I could ask our Canadian friends to do anything, would be reflect on what they could do for defense spending. But I think beyond that, we've had a very equitable, fair, and a friendly relationship that we want to protect and build on.
Since the change in government, Prime Minister Mark Carney has tried to, at least in terms of the announcements that he's made and some of what we've heard about what's been going on with trade talks, there have been increased commitments to meet NATO spending goals. But again, Canada has to actually follow through and get there and then present it to the White House to say, hey, this concern that it's not just the Trump administration that's had this concern. This has been a concern about Canada's military spending way back. So this is not necessarily a new concern, but in this moment, it appears that the government is trying to address the concerns from the Trump White House. But you mentioned Russia there. I know that you have been critical of, in some cases, of how the United States has responded in terms of how the Trump administration has responded in terms of what's going on with the war in Ukraine. Before you go, I'm curious to ask you what you think of Donald Trump's meeting in Alaska on Friday and what your concerns are and what you're hoping comes out of it.
Well, we have some concerns because the president's been unpredictable when it comes to Russia. I think he's been very good with Iran. I think he's been good with China. But for some reason with Russia, he's hit and miss. I don't understand why, because it's clear to me, it's clear to 80% of the people out there that Putin's a bad guy. He's killed his adversaries. Russia's changed their borders 9 times using force since 1991. And the invasion of Ukraine is the worst, but it's the latest. They're not going to stop unless the free world stands up to Putin and stops this. And it's in our national security interest that Ukraine prevails, because if Ukraine goes down, you got Moldova, you got Azerbaijan, Georgia, maybe the Baltics. You got to stop the schoolyard bully in the process, because otherwise they'll keep coming back at you. And the president has been hit and miss on this. He's had a blind spot here. Lately, it's been sounding better, and I hope the tone that he's had the last month is the spirit that he goes to these negotiations with Putin in Alaska. But I'm not going to criticize yet or praise. I want to see the results coming out of this meeting. And Ukraine should not be demanded of giving away territory for peace. For one, you can't trust Putin. 2, you shouldn't reward an invader, right? You should not reward that bad behavior. And so we got to stand by Ukraine's side here. They're the victim. And if Ukraine ever has to give up any territory to give peace, then they should have security guarantees with the United States and other NATO countries, and so that Russia knows they cannot just renew this war and do it again next year.
All right, Representative Don Bacon, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Canada has been navigating President Donald Trump's trade war for more than 6 months now. Negotiation deadlines have come and gone, and still no deal is in sight. As it stands, Canada is facing a 35% tariff on all goods that are not CUSMA compliant. Plus, there are some sectoral tariffs as well. For now, Prime Minister Mark Carney is standing by retaliatory tariffs, though it appears unlikely new countermeasures are in the works. Earlier, I spoke to U.S. Representative Don Bacon, one of the few Republicans speaking out against Trump's trade war.
I, for the life of me, don't know what the president or the White House sees in benefit in, degrading or insulting our neighbor. It doesn't gain us anything. It surely doesn't gain Canada anything. It hurts our economic relationship, and I don't see a single purpose being filled here.
So where does this leave the talks? Let's bring in the power panel. Lisa Raitt is a former Conservative cabinet minister. Here with me in studio is Vandana Qatar, was an advisor to former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. And Rob Russo is the Canada correspondent for The Economist and was my former boss. Hello, former boss.
Nobody could be your boss. You're unmanageable.
That's actually very true. Okay, so I'm going to start with Lisa. We heard from Prime Minister Carney last week saying that, the current plan that's in place with retaliatory tariffs, it does not appear that he's going to be moving towards more countermeasures. And if anything, he might be removing some of those. From your perspective, what do you make of that?
What I make of all of that is that we need to come up with new moves to try to solidify a deal. I think that's what it comes down to. Just kind of like throwing everything at the wall right now. If it is retaliatory tariffs that are making the Americans upset, well, maybe we'll go back and revisit those. It's that risk reward. Is it better to have these in place? Are we actually achieving the result we want to have by having these in place? Or are we just hurting ourselves by having these in place? So I can see the analysis going forward, but I'm beginning to get really worried, to be honest, whether or not we do have the ability to land a deal with the Americans at any point, and whether or not we are getting acclimatized to the notion that we're going to be kept in this steady state of uncertainty for the foreseeable future and into the long term as well, which, by the way, not great for investment in this country.
No, and it's not great for jobs, and it's not great for Canadian workers, very certainly. Vandana, I want to ask you, what the point that Lisa just made there, this current constant state of uncertainty. We were speaking with a former Mexican negotiator, a trade negotiator last week here on the show, and he talked about how he thinks all of this sort of trade, all of the tariffs on Canada and Mexico are a pretext to just make the negotiation conditions so difficult during CUSMA renegotiations that it's just easier for the Americans to sort of roll on in and get what they want. Are you concerned that that could sort of be what's at play here, that this tariff war that Canada is enduring and has been enduring, that this just could, be the pretext to sort of get to more concessions?
I can see them trying to do that this way, and I think my current Prime Minister Carney is prepared for that. I think he knows that this might have been a way to try to push Canada to try to get us a deal at any cost. But I think he knows that Canadians want not just any deal, but a good deal for Canada. And while a lot of things are covered currently already under USMCA, I think that's why we keep looking at other options. So we've seen the supports for steel industry, the supports for softwood lumber, but also just preparing Canadians to be like, there's going to be some volatility here, but we need to continue to invest in Canada. We need to focus on Canadian jobs and find other partners. So focusing on Europe, focusing on Asia, other partners that are more reliable, because now more than ever, it doesn't look like U.S., even with Donald Trump, without Donald Trump, it doesn't look like it'll be a reliable partner for much longer.
Rob, what do you make of this moment that Canada is in, and how much more sort of political latitude will Canadians be giving Mark Carney for as long as this stretches on?
Well, if you look at the data, it appears that he continues to have the backing of Canadians who are still outraged, furious, and on their hind legs. That being said, there is some method. I agree with Lisa. I think that the sort of casual nature of Canada's response right up until now belies the fact that they tried to get a deal. We had a prime minister who set a July 21st deadline for a deal, and then an August 1st deadline. It's come and gone. They spent a lot of time in Washington, as you know, at trying to get a deal. So I'm sure they would prefer a deal. That being said, here are the criterion that the Europeans had to face that we don't have to face. Europeans are basically saying we need a deal now because we've got nothing. 15% is better than 35%. And in the interim, we've got the midterm elections in a little bit more than a year. After that, if worse comes to worse, we also have court cases making their way through, so maybe we'll get relief from that. Canada doesn't need that. Canada has this deal for now. They don't have to sit around and wait for court cases or the midterms. But that's no guarantee. We have the sort of advisory period that begins this fall on CUSMA. And I have to say something about Congressman Bacon. He's a fascinating figure.
He is.
And I'll tell you why. He's one of those rare Republicans who actually had to be sanctioned by his own party, urged by his own party. I'll use a different term. He was urged to stop kneeing Donald Trump in the nether regions by Republicans because of his disagreement on trade. He's got pork producers in his state Those pork producers depend on young pigs coming down from Canada and then working their way through the system in the United States, being processed down there. So this is a rare guy, also rare because he's in a district that was won by Kamala Harris. So he's a blue dot Republican in a way. There was a blue dot on his riding or on his district. Really, really interesting. So a guy who defied Donald Trump, not going to be able to run again because he feared a challenge, and concerned about bringing home the Canadian bacon, as they say.
As very specifically, as they say. The other issue I want to talk to all of y'all about today is with what is going on with Russia and Ukraine. Donald Trump made some pretty intense comments. I don't know how to describe them. Made comments that, we haven't traditionally heard an American president speak like this, but I know that we always say that about Trump. But we want to play a little bit. I believe we have a little bit of what Donald Trump said today about the talks that are going to happen on Friday. Donald Trump is going to Alaska. He's going to meet with Vladimir Putin. And here is sort of the stage he's setting for what should be expected. Have a listen.
There'll be some swapping. There'll be some changes in land, and the word that they will use is, they make changes. We're going to change the lines, the battle lines. Russia's occupied a big portion of Ukraine. They've occupied some very prime territory. We're going to try and get some of that territory back for Ukraine.
Now, today, Mark Carney and Ukrainian Prime Minister Volodymyr Zelensky, they spoke on the phone about those upcoming negotiations and Canada's commitment to peace in Ukraine, with Zelensky saying, "Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Canada, for your support and readiness together for a lasting peace." Now, all of that being said, and we also believe Prime Minister Mark Carney, we also spoke with Keir Starmer about this today. So this is clearly a pressing concern right now. Lisa, I'm curious, what do you think Canada, is there anything Canada can do in this moment ahead of these talks between Russian President Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump?
Other than making sure that Yukon is protected from these land changes that are going to happen in Alaska this weekend, no. I think that we're fine in just watching from the outside. From what I can surmise, this is a situation where Donald Trump feels he needs to interfere or to intercede in order to try to get a deal for Russia, it would appear, not for Ukraine. And as a result, it may just be a meeting that runs its course. He can't get a deal. He pronounces that he tried to get a deal and he couldn't get a deal. And then they move on from there. But I can't read into too much other than to say it's very surprising that Vladimir Putin's agreeing to go to the United States. It must be some concern that this war continues to drag on in that part of the world, and he wants to see some kind of conclusion to it, and he's asking his friend Donald Trump to help him out.
Vandana, you were an advisor for former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. In this moment, if you were still in your role working in Prime Minister Mark Carney's government, what do you think the conversations behind the scenes would be around this, even if Canada's not sort of playing a direct role?
It would be, I think you're seeing a stronger positioning of Canada to Europe, and you're seeing a trifecta of London, of France, of Canada coming together more and more often. I think because our values aligned and how we want to share ourselves in the international community. And I think all that Canada can do is continue to echo what the European Union says, to stand strong with them and with Ukraine. I mean, it's unfortunate to see this. I think Ukraine should be at the table, but who knows what will happen? We'll have to see on Friday. But I think if I was advising the Prime Minister right now, it would be to continue to talk to our allies, to stand strong with Ukraine as much as possible, and to do our part in that. I'm not sure how much leeway we have, but Europe with Canada can be a lot stronger than just Canada on its own.
And Rob, before you were the Canada correspondent for The Economist, before you were the boss here at CBC, you were also a Washington correspondent, a Washington bureau chief, if I am correct, for a very long time. I'm very keen for your perspective on when you look at the comments that Donald Trump is making and sort of the positioning around Russia. What's your big picture takeaway? What do you think?
Well, I'm struck by that experience and by my experience of speaking to Europeans and telling European diplomats. And I can tell you that there is concern that the stout defenders of the terrified citizens of Foggy Bottom and Chevy Chase might not be able might not be a match for Vladimir Putin. There's a sense that he may, in effect, be lured into making concessions without the Ukrainians there, without the Europeans there. The Europeans, this is their neighborhood. They're living in a neighborhood. They are actually terrified, unlike the denizens of Foggy Bottom and Chevy Chase. Canada does have something at stake. We have 300,000 Ukrainians who have come here. We've helped them settle here. Many of them are making lives here. We've given, I think, over $4 billion either in loan guarantees or in direct aid to the Ukrainians. We have something at stake. We don't have influence, but we have to be very, very careful. And I think, as Lisa said, because when they start talking about territorial concessions, we also have a U.S. president who's interested in Canadian territory as well. And if that becomes the norm and the normal way of thinking, I think that Canadians should be alarmed about that as well.
Lisa, on that point that Rob has made, is the outrage and anger in Canada over those, sort of Trump offhand, whether they're offhand comments or insults or whatever they may be from Trump, do you think that that has Canadians in a heightened state of sort of awareness and alarm, even though the consensus here is so firmly against anything even remotely like that happening?
I think it's such a shock to the system, Katie, to be honest. Who would have thought that we'd be having this conversation of an American president saying that they want to come and take over Canada as the 51st state? It's ludicrous to say it out loud, but it's a reality that we're living with. And the problem is he's backing up his defense policy with it. He's backing up his economic policy with it. And it just seems to be something that he just simply doesn't let go. And it causes you to wonder, is he really serious about this? Does he truly believe that at the end of the day, he can economically force Canada into a situation where they have to become part of the United States? I say no, we're never going to get to that. But the reality is that Canadians are worried about it. And that's what gives, I think, a lot of wind in the sails to the current government.
And Vandana, I'll go last point to you here. On that point, Canadians have aggressively said no. There is political unity on this issue, which is a rare thing in Canada. It's a rare thing in politics anywhere. But do you think it does continue to give that wind in the sails to the Carney government?
I think it's definitely been helpful. I think Mr. Carney's ability to even bring, and you mentioned politics, but premiers of all different stripes, of different ideologies coming together, they seem fairly united so far. I think does give the wind in the sails. I think Canadians, this is why they elected Mark Carney. I think they feel like he's an adult. He has the best interest at Canadians at heart, but he also wants seller values. And I think that's what they want from him. But he also is I think, transparent in what is happening. He's already indicated that there are some tariffs that may stay, that it is difficult. He doesn't try to hide behind that. So I think there's trust in that right now, and it gives trust in this current government because it hasn't been focused on partisan politics. It's been focused on what's best for Canada, which I think ultimately that's what Canadians are looking for.
Okay, Rob, we have 1 minute left, or probably 45 seconds at this point. One last thing I want to ask you about is, I'm not sure if you caught Donald Trump's announcement today about sending in the National Guard to the United States, or into Washington, D.C. I'm curious, as someone who was once a Washington bureau chief, what you just think about what we've witnessed.
Yeah, I was there when the crime rate was coming down at an alarming level, and at a great level, not an alarming level. It was wonderful. I rode the metro, the subway, the buses on a daily basis in Washington, D.C., and yes, there is crime in Washington. Yes, it needs to be tackled. But apparently, it's now as safe or safer than when I lived there some 20 years ago. So it's mysterious to me. I wonder if the mystery might be related to the fact that it's a Democratic city with no congressional representation.
And we'll have a conversation about that later. Okay, thank you very much, Power Panel.